The wine surged through my veins like liquid fire as I watched William Harrington's words form in slow motion. My fingernails dug crescents into my palms as the room around me blurred, his voice somehow both muffled and painfully clear. "My son deserves better than someone from the gutter," he announced to the room full of his country club friends, business associates, and his now frozen family members. Street garbage in a borrowed dress, pretending to belong in our world. 23 pairs of eyes swiveled between William and me, waiting to see if the nobody dating the prince would dare respond to the king. I felt each heartbeat in my throat as I carefully folded the napkin, fabric that probably cost more than my first apartment's rent. I placed it beside my untouched plate of overpriced salmon. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Harrington," I said, standing slowly, "and thank you for finally being honest about how you feel." My name is Zafira. I'm 32 and a self-made entrepreneur. This is the story of how I transformed a public humiliation into the most expensive lesson a man ever learned. "Zafira, don't!" Quinn grabbed my hand. I squeezed his fingers gently, then let go. "It's fine, love. Your father's right. I should know my place." The smirk on William's face was worth memorizing. That self-satisfied expression of a man who thought he'd won, who believed he'd finally driven away the street rat who dared to touch his precious son. If only he knew. I walked out of that dining room with my head high, past the Monet in the hallway, past the servants who avoided eye contact, past the Bentley in the driveway that William had made sure to mention cost more than I'd make in 5 years. I walked through the marble foyer and out to the circular driveway where my car was parked. Quinn caught up to me at my car, my sensible Toyota that William had sneered at when I'd pulled up. "I'm so sorry," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I had no idea he would—" I pulled him close, inhaling the scent of his cologne mixed with the salt of his tears. "This isn't your fault." "I'll talk to him, make him apologize." "No." I tucked a strand of his dark hair behind his ear. "No more apologizing for him, no more making excuses. He said what he's been thinking for the past year. At least now we know where we stand." "Zafira, please don't let him ruin us." I kissed his forehead. "He can't ruin what's real, Quinn. I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" He nodded reluctantly, and I drove away from the Harrington estate, watching in my rearview mirror as the mansion grew smaller, its lights twinkling like stars I'd supposedly never reach. My phone started buzzing before I even hit the main road. I ignored it, knowing it was probably Quinn's mother, Rachel, trying to smooth things over, or maybe his sister, Patricia, offering awkward solidarity. They weren't bad people, just weak ones, too afraid of William to ever stand up to him. But I had more important calls to make. I voice-dialed my assistant as I merged onto the highway. "Danielle, I know it's late." "Miss Cross, is everything all right?" Danielle had been with me for 6 years, since before the world knew who Zafira Cross really was. She could read my moods like a book. "Cancel the Harrington Industries merger." Silence. Then period. "Ma'am, we're supposed to sign papers on Monday. The due diligence is complete. Financing is secured." "I'm aware. Kill it?" "The termination fees alone will be—" "I don't care about the fees. Send the notice to their legal team tonight. Cite irreconcilable differences in corporate culture and vision." "Zafira—" Danielle dropped the formalities, which she only did when she thought I was making a mistake. "This is a $2 billion deal. Whatever happened at dinner." He called me garbage, Danny, in front of a room full of people, made it clear that someone like me will never be good enough for his family, or by extension, his business. That bastard. Danielle's fingers were already flying across her keyboard. I could hear it through the phone. "I'll have legal draw up the termination papers within the hour. Want me to leak it to the financial press?" "Not yet. Let him wake up to the official notice first. We'll let the media have it by noon tomorrow." "With pleasure, ma'am. Anything else?" I thought for a moment. "Yes. Set up a meeting with Fairchild Corporation for Monday. If Harrington Industries won't sell, maybe their biggest competitor will—" "You're going to buy his rival instead?" "Why not? Garbage has to stick together, right?" I hung up and drove the rest of the way to my penthouse in silence. The city lights blurred past, each one a reminder of how far I'd come from the kid who'd slept in shelters and survived on free school lunches. William Harrington thought he knew me, thought he'd researched enough to understand what kind of woman was dating his son. He knew I'd grown up poor, that I'd started working at 14, that I'd put myself through community college and then university through sheer determination and an unhealthy amount of caffeine. What he didn't know was that the scrappy kid he looked down on had built a corporate empire while staying in the shadows, that Cross Technologies, the company his own firm was desperately trying to merge with to stay relevant in the tech age, was mine, that I'd spent the last decade acquiring patents, poaching talent, and strategically positioning myself to become the kingmaker in our industry. He didn't know because I'd kept it quiet, using holding companies and trusted executives as the face of my operations. I'd learned early that real power came from being underestimated, from letting blowhards like William think they held all the cards. As I pulled into my building's garage, my phone lit up with an incoming call. Harrington CFO Martin Keating. That was faster than expected. Martin had my personal number from our previous merger discussions, where we'd exchanged contact information for urgent matters. Zafira, it's Martin. I'm sorry to call so late, but we just received a notice from Cross Technologies terminating the merger agreement. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Martin. But we're set to sign Monday. The board has already approved. Shareholders are expecting... Then the board should have thought about that before their CEO publicly humiliated me at dinner tonight. Silence. Then quietly. Period. What did William do? Ask him yourself. I'm sure he'll give you his version. Good night, Martin. I hung up and headed to my penthouse, pouring myself a scotch and settling onto the balcony to watch the city sleep. Somewhere out there, William Harrington was about to have his evening ruined. I wondered if he'd make the connection immediately or if it would take him a while to realize that the garbage he dismissed controlled the one thing his company needed to survive the next fiscal year. My phone buzzed, Quinn calling. I let it go to voicemail, not trusting myself to separate my anger at his father from my love for him. He didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire, but some battles couldn't be avoided. By morning, my phone had logged 47 missed calls. William had tried reaching me 6 times himself, which must have been killing him. The great William Harrington reduced to repeatedly calling someone he declared garbage. I was reviewing quarterly reports over breakfast when Danielle called. The financial press got wind of the terminated merger. Bloomberg wants a statement. Tell them Cross Technologies has decided to explore other opportunities that better align with our values and vision for the future. Vague and devastating. I love it. She paused. Also, William Harrington is in the lobby. I nearly spit out my coffee. He's here? Showed up 20 minutes ago. Security won't let him up without your approval, but he's making quite a scene. Should I have him removed? No. I set down my mug, thinking. Send him up, but make him wait in the conference room for, let's say, 30 minutes. I'm finishing breakfast. You're evil. I'll prep conference room C, the one with the uncomfortable chairs. 45 minutes later, I walked into the conference room to find William Harrington looking significantly less imposing than he had the night before. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tailored suit rumpled. The man who'd lorded over dinner like a king now looked like what he was, a desperate CEO watching his company's future evaporate. Zafira, he stood when I entered, and I could see how much it cost him. Thank you for seeing me. I sat down without offering him a handshake. You have 5 minutes. He swallowed his pride like broken glass. I apologize for last night. My words were inappropriate. Inappropriate? I laughed. You called me garbage in front of your entire social circle. You humiliated me in your own home at your own table, while I was there as your guest and your son's girlfriend. I was drunk. No, I cut him off. You were honest. Drunk words, sober thoughts. You thought I was beneath you from the moment Quinn introduced us. Last night, you just finally said it out loud. William's jaw tightened. Even now, even desperate, he couldn't fully hide his disdain. What do you want? An apology? You have it. A public statement? I'll make one. Just The merger needs to happen. You know it does. Why? Excuse me? Why does it need to happen? Explain to me why I should do business with someone who fundamentally disrespects me. William's face flushed. Because it's business. It's not personal. Everything is personal when you make it personal. I stood up. You researched me, right? Dug into my background, found out about the foster homes, the free lunch programs, the night shifts at warehouses to pay for textbooks. He nodded reluctantly. But you stopped there. You saw where I came from and assumed that defined me. You never looked at where I was going. I walked to the window, gesturing at the city below. Do you know why Cross Technologies is successful, William? Because you have good products. Because I remember being hungry. Because I remember being dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. Every person we hire, every deal we make, every product we develop, I ask myself if we're creating opportunity or just protecting privilege. I turned back to him. Your company represents everything I built mine to fight against. Old money protecting old ideas, keeping the door closed to anyone who didn't inherit their seat at the table. That's not, isn't it? Name one person on your board who didn't go to an Ivy League school. One executive who grew up below the poverty line. One senior manager who had to work 3 jobs to put themselves through community college. His silence was answer enough. The merger is dead, William. Not because you insulted me, but because you showed me who you really are. And more importantly, you showed me who your company really is. This will destroy us, he said quietly. Without this merger, Harrington Industries won't survive the next 2 years. Then maybe it shouldn't. I headed for the door. Maybe it's time for the old guard to make way for companies that judge people by their potential, not their pedigree. Wait. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over. What about Quinn? You're going to destroy his father's company, his inheritance. I paused at the door. Quinn is brilliant, talented, and capable. He doesn't need to inherit success. He can build his own. That's the difference between us, William. You see inheritance as destiny. I see it as a crutch. He'll never forgive you. Maybe not. But at least he'll know I have principles that can't be bought or intimidated away. Can you say the same? I left him there and went back to my office. Danielle was waiting with a stack of messages and a knowing look. Fairchild Corporation wants to meet Monday morning. They're very interested in discussing an acquisition. Good. Make sure William hears about it by this afternoon. Already arranged for the information to leak. She paused. Quinn is in your private office. My heart skipped. How long? About an hour. I brought him coffee and tissues. How did he know to come here? I asked. He called the office main line asking for you. When I told him you were in a meeting with his father, he asked if he could wait for you. Given the circumstances, I thought you wouldn't mind, Danielle explained. After leaving William in the conference room, I headed back to my private office where Danielle informed me Quinn was waiting. I found him curled up in my desk chair, eyes red but dry. He looked up when I entered and I saw his father's strength but his mother's kindness in his face. Hi, he said softly. Hi. I heard what you told him. Danielle let me watch on the conference room feed. I sat on the edge of my desk. And I think... He stood up, coming to stand between my knees. I think I'd been a coward, letting him treat you that way, making excuses, hoping it would get better. Quinn, no, let me finish. He took my hands. I've spent my whole life benefiting from his prejudices without challenging them. Last night, watching him, I was ashamed. Not of me, of him, of myself for not standing up to him sooner. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you'll have me, I want to build something new with you, without my family's money or connections or conditional approval. I pulled him close. Are you sure? He's right about one thing. Walking away from that inheritance is no small thing. He laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in days. Zephyr Cross, you just terminated a $2 billion merger because my father disrespected you. I think we'll figure out the money part. I love you, I said, meaning it more than ever. I love you too, even if you did just declare corporate war on my father. Especially because I declared corporate war on your father. Especially because of that, he agreed, kissing me. My phone buzzed. Danielle again. Ma'am, William Harrington is holding an emergency board meeting. Our sources say they're discussing reaching out to you directly over his head. I put the phone on speaker. Tell them Cross Technologies might be willing to discuss a merger with Harrington Industries under new leadership. Emphasis on new. Quinn's eyes widened. You're going to oust my father from his own company. I'm going to give the board a choice. Evolve or perish. What they do with that choice is up to them. He thought about it for a moment, then nodded. He won't go quietly. I wouldn't expect him to. This is going to get ugly. Probably. My mother will cry. Definitely. My sister will write another terrible song about family drama. God help us all. She smiled, and it was sharp and beautiful and a little bit dangerous. So when do we start? I smiled back. How about now? And that's how the nobody dating the princess became the king who toppled the kingdom. Not with a sword or an army, but with a simple truth. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And those who refuse to give it when it's earned, well, they learn the hard way that sometimes the garbage takes itself out and takes everything else with it. By the following Monday, William Harrington was no longer CEO of Harrington Industries. By Tuesday, Cross Technologies had announced a merger with the newly restructured company. By Wednesday, Quinn had accepted a position as our new head of strategic development, turning down her father's offer to fund a rival venture out of spite. And by Thursday? Well, by Thursday, William Harrington had learned the most expensive lesson of his life. Never call someone garbage unless you're prepared to be thrown out with it. 6 months later, Quinn and I were engaged, with plans for a small ceremony far away from her father's social circle. William hadn't spoken to either of us since his removal as CEO, though Quinn's mother called weekly, slowly rebuilding their relationship on new, more honest terms. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one. A strange heat crept up my neck as Rebecca's voice carried across our table, her words pitched perfectly for nearby diners to hear. Well, aren't you brave coming here tonight, sweetie? Most girls from broken homes wouldn't have the confidence. The elegant crystal glasses on our table seemed to amplify her voice, and I felt every conversation around us pause. My mother's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her napkin beside me. I watched Rebecca's smile, the kind that never reached her eyes, as she continued her performance. I mean, it must be so hard not having a father figure to teach you about appropriate behavior. Yale mentioned you're from a single-parent household. She said it like announcing a contagious disease. My date, Yale, heir apparent to Meridian Bank, nodded approvingly at his mother's assessment. His father, David, cleared his throat and leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to seem discreet while ensuring we heard every word. It's really not appropriate for people like you to pursue someone of Yale's caliber. You must understand the complications this would create. The ambient restaurant noise faded to white static as I realized this wasn't a casual family dinner. This was an ambush. My name is Quinn. I'm 29 and a marketing director. This is the story of how I taught a family of banking elites that some people fight back. 3 weeks earlier, I'd agreed to this blind date reluctantly. My college friend Sarah had insisted Yale was perfect for me. Successful, educated, family-oriented. Sarah had gotten Yale's contact information through her cousin who worked at Meridian Bank and thought we'd be a good match. What she hadn't mentioned was his immediate disappointment when he learned I worked for a tech company instead of a respectable financial institution. Marketing, he'd said during our first coffee, his tone suggesting I'd admitted to being unemployed. That must be creative. But when he'd suggested meeting our parents, I'd foolishly interpreted it as genuine interest. Mom had been hesitant when I'd asked her to join us. Something feels off about this guy, Quinn, the way he talks about people, like we're categories instead of individuals. Maybe he's just nervous, I'd reasoned. Besides, if it goes badly, at least we'll have backup. If only we'd trusted her instincts. They'd arrived 20 minutes late without apology, David immediately scanning the restaurant like he was evaluating its worthiness. Rebecca had air-kissed me while somehow managing to look over my shoulder the entire time, as if expecting someone more important to appear. "So where's Quinn's father?" Rebecca had asked Mom directly, her voice syrupy with false concern. "Working late?" Mom's response had been gracious despite the obvious setup. "My husband passed away from cancer when Quinn was 12. I've raised her alone since then." That's when Rebecca had raised her voice, ensuring maximum audience impact. "Oh my goodness, Quinn's from a broken home. How difficult that must have been, trying to manage everything yourself." The emphasis on manage carried clear implications about our financial situation. Each comment cut deeper as their performance continued. Yale joined in seamlessly, mentioning how he preferred traditional family values and found strong-willed women exhausting. David added his own commentary about appropriate social circles and understanding one's place. The most infuriating part wasn't their cruelty. It was how rehearsed it felt, like they'd done this before. Finally, Mom's composure cracked. "Did you invite us here specifically to humiliate us? Because if this is how you treat people you consider beneath you, we're done listening." Now, no need to get emotional," David responded, his patronizing tone making my skin crawl. "We're just being practical about compatibility." Practical? I found my voice for the first time that evening. "You mean cruel?" Yale laughed, actually laughed. "Come on, Quinn, you can't be this naive. Look around. This is a $200 per person restaurant. Your mom probably works retail. You really think this could work long term?" The assumption about Mom's job was the final straw. She worked as a hospital administrator, managing budgets larger than Yale's trust fund, but they'd never bothered to ask. "Actually," Mom said, her voice dangerously quiet, "I think we should close our accounts with your bank. Immediately." Rebecca and David exchanged amused glances. "Oh, sweetie," Rebecca cooed, "I'm sure your little savings account won't make much difference to us." "You're probably right," Mom agreed, "but my father-in-law's accounts might." For the first time that evening, their smug expressions faltered slightly. "Excuse me?" David's voice had lost its condescending edge. I smiled for the first time all night. "You should probably ask Yale about his due diligence skills. He never bothered to research who he was dating." That night, I made a call I hadn't needed to make in years. "Grandpa Harrison, it's Quinn. I need your help with something." "What's wrong, sweetheart?" His voice was immediately alert despite the late hour. "It's about Meridian Bank, specifically about the Wilson family." A long pause. "What happened?" I explained everything. The setup, the systematic humiliation, their assumptions about our background. When I finished, the silence stretched uncomfortably. "They have no idea who you are," he said finally, his voice carrying the steel I remembered from childhood visits to his office. "None. And they made it very clear what they think about single mothers and people they consider lower class. Come to the house tomorrow morning. Bring your mother and bring your phone. I assume you recorded this?" Every word. "Smart girl. We'll handle this properly." The next morning, Mom and I drove to Harrison's estate in Westchester, where he'd been planning his response to the Wilson family's behavior. 1 week passed in relative quiet. Yale called constantly, leaving increasingly desperate messages that I ignored before blocking his number entirely. Then Harrison called with news that his board influence as founding shareholder had secured the outcome we'd hoped for. "Grandpa Harrison wants us at Meridian Bank tomorrow at 10 a.m., I told Mom. "Conference room B." "Are you sure about this approach, Quinn?" "They chose this fight, Mom. They just chose it with the wrong family." The next morning, we met Harrison in the bank's marble lobby before taking the executive elevator to the 20th floor conference room. The Wilson family was already waiting, looking considerably less confident than they had at dinner. Rebecca jumped up the moment we entered, practically bowing as she rushed toward us. "Quinn, Mrs. Chen, I am so incredibly sorry about the other night. We had no idea, Q. Sorry about what exactly? I interrupted, taking a seat across from them. Which part are you apologizing for? Rebecca's mouth opened and closed silently, apparently overwhelmed by the catalog of behavior she needed to address. Let me help, I continued. Are you sorry for the public humiliation, for the assumptions about our financial situation, for the comments about broken homes, or just for getting caught? The door opened before she could respond, and Harrison Kent entered with the quiet authority that had built a banking empire from nothing. At 76, he still commanded immediate respect from anyone who understood power. Yale's face went white. I didn't know Quinn was related to your bank's founder? Harrison finished. No, you didn't bother to find out anything real about her, did you? Mr. Kent, David stammered, standing awkwardly. If we had known about your family connection, you would have treated her differently, Mom said quietly. That's exactly the problem. Look, Yale snapped, his composure finally cracking. How were we supposed to know some random marketing girl was connected to the former CEO? She should have mentioned it up front. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Some random marketing girl, Harrison repeated slowly. Interesting choice of words, especially considering you're about to lose your succession path. That's completely unfair, David protested. This is being blown out of proportion. Is it? I pulled out my phone and placed it on the conference table. Let's find out. The recorded conversation filled the room, their voices echoing off polished walls. Rebecca's theatrical gasps about broken homes, David's comments about appropriate social circles, Yale's laughter when he'd assumed Mom worked retail. How dare you record us without permission? Yale shouted when it ended. That's completely underhanded. You mean, like ambushing someone at dinner specifically to humiliate them? I replied. At least I was transparent about my intentions. Harrison stood slowly, his presence filling the space. David, you'll be transitioning out of your CEO role effective immediately. The board has already voted. This is insane, David's voice cracked. Over one dinner conversation? Over a pattern of behavior that reflects your character and judgment, Harrison corrected. And Yale, your path to succession is permanently closed. I won't have someone with your values representing this institution. You can't do this to us, Rebecca whimpered. We've given our lives to this bank. You've taken from this bank, Harrison replied. There's a difference. Security will escort you out after you clear your offices. As we left the building, I felt the weight of 3 weeks finally lifting from my shoulders. Mom squeezed my hand as we walked to the parking garage. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. For what? Getting revenge? For standing up for us, for refusing to accept their version of who we are. The aftermath unfolded exactly as Harrison had predicted. David's termination made financial industry headlines, ensuring his reputation would follow him. Anywhere he applied, Yale's behavior during the confrontation had been witnessed by board members, making him unemployable in banking circles. Rebecca, who had built her identity around being the CEO's wife, apparently took a job at a department store. Ironic, considering her assumptions about Mom's career. According to industry gossip, Sarah kept me updated through her network of mutual friends about how the Wilson family was adjusting to their new circumstances. Rebecca's adjustment to retail work was challenging. Yale eventually left town entirely, supposedly taking a job with a small credit union in another state where his family name carried less weight. I felt bad for Sarah, who had innocently set up the original date. I had no idea they were like that, she apologized. I only knew Yale through mutual friends. It's not your fault, I assured her. You couldn't have known they were professional bullies. Mom had initially worried that our response was too harsh, but I reminded her of something important. They didn't just insult us, Mom. They insulted every single parent, every person they consider lower class, every family that doesn't fit their narrow definition of acceptable. We didn't ruin their lives. We held them accountable for their choices. 6 months later, I received the promotion I'd been working toward, earned through merit, not family connections. I'm not interested in dating yet, still processing everything that happened, but I'm content with my life. Most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts about people. When someone shows you who they are through their treatment of others, believe them the first time. And maybe someday I'll meet someone who values character over pedigree, someone who judges people by their actions rather than their backgrounds. Until then, I'm perfectly happy building the life I want on my own terms. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one. The words on my phone screen seemed to shimmer and distort as my brother's voice rang in my ears. Hey, so listen, Natalie's coming to Christmas, right? She's really into energy, like how a room feels. And with your work, sometimes it can feel kind of heavy. The plush forest green sweater I'd just purchased slipped from my fingers, landing in a heap by the already packed suitcase. I think for her sake, it might be better if you sat this one out. It's nothing personal. Nothing personal. As if telling your sister she can't come home for Christmas 3 days before the holiday was somehow separate from who she was. My name is Rachel. I'm 36 and a geriatric physician. This is the story of how I became visible by disappearing. I didn't argue. I didn't ask what he meant by heavy. He didn't say, period. You're a dedicated doctor who helps elderly patients die with dignity. No, just heavy. Like a wet towel on his Instagram aesthetic. When my mother called an hour later, her voice was soft like a lullaby hiding a grenade. Honey, we're just trying to make this easy for everyone. You know how sensitive she is. If you come, it could cause confusion. Honestly, we might not answer the door. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just uninvited. I was unwanted. The hospital ID badge hanging from my neck suddenly felt like it weighed 20 pounds. I'd just finished a 14-hour shift helping an 87-year-old woman say goodbye to her family with grace and dignity. And now my own family was telling me I wasn't welcome at their table. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I simply said, okay, hung up and opened my banking app. Mortgage payment supplement for my parents, canceled. Car loan assistance for my brother Owen, terminated. Emergency maintenance fund for family crises, locked. I stopped being their silent backbone. No social media post, no message, just silence. And for the first time, that silence was mine. I used to think the way my family treated me was normal, that maybe I was just too serious, too focused, too much. Growing up as the oldest, I was the trial run, as my dad once joked at a barbecue right before handing Owen the bigger slice of cake. Owen, the golden boy. Creative, charming, the miracle baby born after years of trying. I was just first. When Owen was 6, he drew all over the living room wall with permanent marker. My parents called it expressive. When I broke a bowl while helping set the table, I was careless and told I needed to pay more attention. Owen came home from school with a participation ribbon once. It stayed on the fridge for a week. I brought home straight A's and they said, "That's nice." Then slid the report card into a drawer. Once, I even left my perfect GPA letter on the kitchen counter, hoping someone would ask. No one did. When I got accepted to medical school, first round, no gap year, no second tries, I printed the acceptance letter and showed it to my mom. She said, "Wow, that's intense. You'll have to be careful not to burn out." When Owen dropped out of college for the 3rd time to pursue creative direction, they threw him a re-entry party. Balloons, cake. A photo of him with a paintbrush now sits framed in the hallway like he cured cancer. They always said he was artsy, that he felt things deeply. I once found my sketchbook in the recycling bin under grocery store flyers. When I asked, they said they thought it was scrap paper. But I kept going. I worked hard. I graduated early. I got licensed. I started treating elderly patients. People who had been dismissed, forgotten, left to decline alone. I gave them my time, my energy, my whole heart. At home, I gave just as quietly. Fixed their plumbing, paid off a lingering home repair bill without being asked, lent Owen money when his freelance gig fell through, never asked for it back, never even mentioned it. But none of that mattered because, in my family's eyes, Owen was the star, and I, despite everything, was just the one who always showed up on time and didn't complain. Until I didn't. There's a strange kind of pain in being the person everyone relies on but no one really sees. That was me. The fixer, the helper, the one who quietly covered the cost of a new water heater when theirs broke down in February, the one who spotted the overdraft on my parents' account and transferred money before they even noticed, the one who booked Owen's flight home for Thanksgiving last year when he said he was a little strapped after buying new camera equipment, and I never said no. Not once. Not when my mom needed co-pays for her physical therapy. Not when Owen called me from the side of the road because his car battery had died. Again. I bought him a new one that week. I was useful, and I thought that meant I was valued. But I started noticing the pattern. The way my contributions were invisible until they stopped. The way they forgot who had helped, but remembered who had made things uncomfortable. When I was there, I was too quiet, too serious, too intense. When I wasn't there, things were lighter, easier, more fun. Still, I kept helping. Out of love, I told myself. Out of obligation, maybe. Or maybe just out of habit. But that night, after they told me not to come to Christmas, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage, it was realization. I opened my bank app and paused each recurring transfer. The $800 monthly top-up to their mortgage, gone. The rainy day account I kept for family emergencies, locked. The $1,200 Owen still owed me? I knew it would never come back, but I wouldn't let another cent go his way. They wouldn't feel it right away. That's the thing about being silently useful. It's only when the support disappears that people realize it was there at all. I didn't announce my withdrawal. I didn't post a passive-aggressive quote online. I didn't even tell my friends. I just let the silent absence settle in, and for the first time, it felt like peace. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone in my apartment with a mug of hot tea and a blanket that still smelled faintly like rosemary and fabric softener. I didn't open the gifts I had wrapped. I didn't light the tree. I didn't cry either. I just sat still. There was a strange power in not showing up where I wasn't wanted. But the day after Christmas, my phone buzzed. Not once, 3 times. My mother ignored. Then a text. "Can you answer? You've done enough damage already." My stomach dropped. Then a new call, this time from my dad's sister, the only one in the family who still sent birthday cards with little notes in them. I answered. "What happened yesterday?" she asked softly. "They're saying you ruined Christmas, but you weren't even there." I blinked. "I ruined it." She hesitated. "Something happened with Owen's girlfriend, Natalie. She left early. There was yelling. Then your name came up." That was all she knew, but it was enough. Aunt Diane had been there for Christmas dinner, as she had been every year since I could remember. She always observed more than she said. Later that evening, Aunt Diane called again. She had pieced together more. Apparently, Natalie had seen a photo of me in their living room, just an old snapshot, probably from a birthday years ago, and she recognized me. "You saved my grandmother," she had said. "Your doctor, Rachel Mitchell." The room, Diane said, went completely still. What followed wasn't clear, only that Natalie asked if I was the sister they talked about, and whatever she heard next made her quietly gather her things and leave. I didn't need the details. I could imagine it all too well. They probably joked about me as they always did, that I lived in hospitals, that I made things too serious, that I was hard to love. Maybe they even repeated that awful line Owen once said. Rachel is basically death in a pantsuit. It wasn't new, but this time someone else had been listening. Someone who didn't grow up believing that cruelty was just how family speaks. Someone who remembered the doctor who stayed by her grandmother's side when every other physician had given up. Someone who saw me without being told how to see me first. That's how I ruined Christmas. By not being there to maintain the illusion. By not showing up to smile politely while they carved me into a cautionary tale. By being remembered, unexpectedly, for the good I had done for someone who wasn't them. 2 days passed before I got another call. This time, it was from my mother. She didn't say hello. She just launched in, her voice already tense. I don't know what you said to her, but now your brother is a mess. Natalie blocked his number. She won't speak to him. And she posted something online about being treated like garbage by the family of a woman she admires. There was a sound of glass clinking in the background. Maybe she was pacing in the kitchen. Maybe pouring herself a crisis glass of wine. Probably both. She tagged your photo, she added sharply, like I'd committed a crime. I didn't say anything. I let her talk. Eventually, she reached the point. We need you to speak to her. Just clarify that there was no bad intention, that she misunderstood. Right, because I was the family's PR department now. Damage control for the same people who had uninvited me from the dinner table. She's ruining your brother's future, my mom said, quieter now. His name is being dragged in those art circles she's part of. You know, all that stuff in New York. He's being blacklisted. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it was. They had spent decades trying to make me invisible. And now, the consequences of that invisibility were finally landing somewhere they cared about, their image. I didn't respond. I just said, period. I'll think about it. I didn't think about it. Instead, I opened Instagram and searched for Natalie's profile, which wasn't hard to find since she was tagged in several of Owen's posts he'd sent me months ago. There, I found her viral post. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even dramatic. It was just honest. She wrote about the doctor who had saved her grandmother 3 years ago, about walking into a family celebration hoping for warmth, and instead hearing people joke about that same woman. She wrote how shocked she was that someone so kind and impactful could be so ridiculed by her own family. She didn't use names. She didn't have to. One line stood out. Some people hide cruelty behind polite smiles and holiday lights. But the moment I saw that photo, I remembered what real kindness looks like. And it wasn't anyone sitting at that table. It went viral in her circles. People were sharing it, commenting, tagging others. And for the first time, none of those voices were calling me difficult or heavy. They were saying I mattered. That same night, just before I went to bed, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail. Not from my mother, not from Owen, not even from my father, who only ever calls when he needs help resetting his email password. It was from Natalie. Her voice was quieter than I remembered from the one video Owen had sent weeks ago. Less airy, less polished, more real. Hi, I'm so sorry to reach out like this. I got your number from your aunt. I hope that's okay. I needed to say something. There was a pause, a long one. I didn't know, she said. I didn't really know who you were, but I recognized your photo. You treated my grandmother years ago. She still talks about you. She says, you changed everything. You didn't give up on her when others did. You were kind. You were present. You made her feel like she mattered. Another pause. Her voice cracked slightly this time. I'm sorry about what happened and what was said about you. I had no idea. I couldn't sit there and pretend, so I left. That was it. I listened to it twice, then again, and I cried. Not because I was sad, but because, for the first time in years, someone saw me. Truly saw me. Not through the filter of family expectations or decades of dismissal. Not through the lens of too serious or too intense. Not as a shadow standing behind the golden child, just as me. Natalie didn't ask for anything. She didn't suggest we reconnect or meet up for coffee. She didn't try to fix what she hadn't broken. She simply acknowledged the truth. And somehow, that did more to heal me than 1,000 empty apologies from my own family ever could. 3 days later, a small package arrived in the mail. It was a letter, handwritten on thick paper, ink smudged slightly in the corners. The return address was clearly marked with Natalie's name. She must have gotten my address from Aunt Diane as well. Inside, Natalie wrote more about her grandmother, how she still did yoga twice a week, still walked to the farmer's market, still told the story of the young doctor who looked her in the eye and said, "You're not done yet." She thanked me, not just for saving a life, but for showing her what real strength looked like. I framed the letter, hung it beside my desk, the same desk where I finish patient notes every evening. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. Not to them, not to anyone. Just when I thought the dust had finally settled, my inbox lit up. Subject line: "Let's reset things." It was an email signed by all three of them, my mother, my father, and Owen, a united front, as if they were submitting a group project. The tone was exactly what I expected from people who believed apologies were a form of negotiation. They didn't say sorry, not directly. Instead, they acknowledged that emotions had run high and that they regretted how things may have been perceived, which in plain English translates to, "We still think we're right, but we're afraid of the consequences." They suggested a family brunch, neutral territory, open-hearted discussion, they called it. And then, buried in the fourth paragraph, they mentioned it. They'd really appreciate it if I reached out to Natalie and asked her to take down her post. There it was, the real reason for the sudden olive branch. It wasn't a gesture of healing, it was a bargaining chip, an attempt to restore Owen's reputation in the art circles Natalie moved in, to clean up the mess they'd made, using me as the mop. I didn't respond. The next morning, the escalation began. My father called one of my hospital administrators, someone he'd met once at a charity event years ago when I was given a commendation for patient care. He told him I had been acting emotionally unstable lately, said he was concerned for my well-being. Yes, he tried to gaslight my workplace to discredit me. Thankfully, the administrator called me right away, apologized, told me I had nothing to worry about. So that bridge burned. Then came the group text to extended family, carefully crafted half-truths, no mention of me being excluded, no mention of the comments made behind my back, just a whole lot of, "She's tearing the family apart," and "We're so worried about her mental state." 2 cousins I hadn't heard from in years reached out. One offered me a yoga retreat voucher, just in case you're going through something. Finally, the last move, the most desperate one, a visit. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I heard the knock. I peeked through the peephole. There they were, my parents, Owen. I opened the door, leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "We just want to talk," my mom said gently. I didn't move because by then I finally understood something. They weren't here for me. They were here for the version of me that had always cleaned up their messes, and that version no longer lived here. They stood there for a while, waiting, hoping maybe that I would fold like I used to, that I'd invite them in, that I'd make it easy again. But I didn't. After a few moments of silence, I said, period. No. Just that. No explanations, no anger, no performance. I closed the door and I didn't feel guilty. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea, sat at my desk, and looked at the letter from Natalie, framed in a soft wooden border. It reminded me that the most meaningful recognition often comes from people who have nothing to gain, who simply see you because they've been paying attention. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to earn the love of a family that only ever measured me against a version of themselves they wanted to believe in, the golden child, the artist, the one who made them look good. But I wasn't created to make them feel comfortable. I was born to heal, to hold hands with people on the edge of goodbye, to listen when others turn away. And in doing that, I had made a difference, a real one. I didn't save lives for praise. I didn't cancel payments for revenge. I didn't walk away to prove a point. I walked away because I finally saw the truth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's power in silence, in choosing not to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. There's strength in setting boundaries and keeping them, in knowing that your worth doesn't need a family consensus to be real. As I filed my patient notes for the night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. So to anyone out there who's been made to feel like they're too much, too serious, too inconvenient, let me tell you this: you are not too much. You are not the problem. And you never needed to shrink to fit into someone else's story. Write your own. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever been made to feel invisible by the people who are supposed to see you most, please take a moment to like, share, or comment. Because sometimes the quietest stories carry the loudest truths, and sometimes not showing up is the most powerful thing you can do.